Okay, guys, so this is V, and I want to briefly explain the excretory system. So now, what's the excretory system? The excretory system are groups of organs that is responsible for the elimination of body waste and maintaining homeostasis in the body. Now, we have some structures in the excretory system. We have two kidneys, we have two ureters, we have one urinary bladder, and we have one urethra. Now, let's talk about the kidney. Now, the kidney has the primary function in the excretory system, and its main function is to filter metabolic waste from the blood. Now, so the shape of the kidney is a bean shape, and it lies at the posterior walls of the abdominal cavity. Now, let's talk about the position. So this kidney, remember we said there are two kidneys. It lies at the two sides of the vertebral column, at the level of the 12 thoracic vertebrae to the third lumbar vertebrae. Now, the size of the kidney is about bat soup size. We know that. Then the weight of the kidney is about 150 grams. Then we talk about the width of the kidney is about 6 cm. Then we talk about the length of the kidney is about 11 cm. Now let's talk about the surfaces of the kidney. The kidney has two surfaces. That's the lateral surface. The lateral surface is convex, and we have the medial surface, and the medial surface is concave. The medial surface, there's a slit in the medial surface, and this slit is called the hilum. Now, what is the primary function of the hilum? The hilum allow for the passage of the lymphatics, the renal arteries, and the nerves into the kidney. Now, I want us to know that the kidney constitutes about 0.4% of the total body weight, and it takes 25% of the total cardiac output. So let's talk about the layers of the kidney. So the kidney is composed of 3 layers of tissues, and the first layer is called the fibrous renal fascia. Then we have the perirenal fat capsule. Then we have the fibrous capsule. Now we talk about the fibrous renal fascia. Now, what is the work of the fibrous renal fascia? The fibrous renal fascia just associates the kidney to other organs and holds it firmly to the abdominal walls. Now, we talk about the perirenal fat capsule. It's made up of adipose connective tissues, okay, adipose tissues rather, sorry. So it's made up of adipose tissues, and it acts as a cushion. So now when we say it acts as a cushion, it holds the kidney firmly to one position, so no matter what we do, the kidney doesn't go out of position. Then we now talk about the fibrous capsule. Now this fibrous capsule has a cellophane nature, and what it does is to protect the kidney against trauma and infection. So now let's talk about the gross structure of the kidney. Now, the gross structure of the kidney, starting from the outer fibrous capsule. So the fibrous capsule is the outer layer, we all know, and it has a cellophane nature. Its main work is to protect the kidney from trauma and infection. Now, the next on our list under the gross structure of the kidney is the cortex. So the cortex is a reddish brown. It has a reddish brown color, and it lies immediately after the fibrous capsule, and it has a thickness of 1 cm. Now we talk about the medulla. Now when we talk about the medulla is the inner layer of the kidney. Now, it's after the cortex, we have the medulla, the inner layer of the kidney, and it contains a striated cup-like structure called the pyramid. Let's talk about the renal columns. Now, this renal columns extends from the cortex. It extends from the cortex and goes down into the sinuses. Or, to make it simpler, the spaces between each pyramid is the renal column. Now let's talk about these pyramids that we have been saying. Now these renal pyramids are conical in shape. It has a broad base that faces the cortex, and it has a blunt end that faces the sinuses. Now this blunt end that faces the sinuses is called the renal papillae. It's called the renal papillae. Now, after knowing that, we talk about the minor calyces. Now, what is a minor calyces? Now, the minor calyces projects into the pyramid to collect urine. This minor calyces projects into the pyramid. I know that the pyramid is where this urine is actually formed. It's formed from the nephrons, from the collecting duct. It gets into that pyramid and it goes out through the minor calyces. So the minor calyces act as a collector. It collects this urine from the pyramid. Now we talk about the major calyces. Now these minor calyces that are merging into different pyramids collecting urine now comes together and merge as one. It forms a major calyces. Now all the urines are gathered together and passes through the major calyces. Now let's talk about the renal pelvis. Now, the renal pelvis is a funnel-shaped structure that collects urine that is formed by the kidney. So now, once this minor calyces gets this urine from the pyramid, it gets into the major calyces and it gets there till it gets into the renal pelvis. Now, this renal pelvis actually carries this urine and transports it into the ureter. So now, we are done with the gross structure of the kidney. So let's talk about the microscopic structure of the kidney. The microscopic structure, the first thing we need to know is that the functional unit of a kidney is called the nephron. The functional unit of the kidney is called a nephron, and it has about 1 million to 2 million nephrons in a person's kidney. So in our kidney, we have about 1 million to 2 million nephrons. Now let's talk about the parts of the nephrons. We have just two parts of the nephrons. We have the glomerulus and we have the tubular. Now let's talk about the glomerulus. Now the glomerulus is a network of capillary of afferent and efferent arteries. Now the capillary of afferent and efferent arteries. So afferent arteries are those arteries going into the glomerular and the glomerular capsule. And we have the efferent, which is going out of the glomerular capsule. So from there, we now talk about the tubular. So this tubular extends from the glomerular down to the collecting ducts where the urine are collected after much filtration. The combination of this glomerular and the glomerular space, otherwise glomerular capsule, otherwise known as the Bowman capsule, is called the Malpighian corpuscle. So the combination of those two is called the Malpighian corpuscle. Now let's talk about Bowman capsule. Now in that glomerular, it's like this. So in that glomerular capsule or Bowman's capsule, there is a space inside the Bowman's capsule, and that space is called the Bowman space. Now, in that space, we have a membrane that covers that space, and that membrane that covers that space, that Bowman space, is called the filtration barrier. That is where the filtration actually takes place. Now, let's talk about the layers of the filtration barrier. It has three layers. We have the capillary endothelial layer, it has the basement membrane, and it has the capsule epithelial layer. So that's all for the kidney. So you talk about the organs associated anteriorly and superiorly to the kidney is the adrenal glands, then posteriorly to the kidney is the diaphragm. Now we talk about the blood supply. Arterial blood supply is the renal arteries, then the venous drainage is the renal veins. Now talk about the nerve supply, that's sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now let's go down to the ureter. That is the second organ. That's the second organ in the excretory system. Now there are two ureters, and this ureter is a muscular tube that extends from the renal pelvis down into the pelvis, into the abdominal cavity, sorry. So it extends from the renal pelvis, and where is the renal pelvis? Is in the kidney. So this ureter acts as a transport system that gets urine from the kidney down into the bladder for temporary storage. Now what is the length of this ureter? Is about 25 to 30 cm. Diameter is about 3 cm. Now let's talk about the location of this ureter. Now this ureter is located behind the peritoneum, and it's located behind the peritoneum and lies at the posterior part of the abdominal walls. Now let's talk about the microscopic structure of the ureter. Now, the microscopic structure of the ureter is composed of three layers or three tissues. Now, the first one is the fibrous tissue, the second one is the muscular layer, and the third one is the mucosa. Now, let's talk about the fibrous tissue. Now, this fibrous capsule or fibrous tissue, this extends from the fibrous capsule of the kidney. So it encloses the ureter and it extends from the fibrous capsule of the kidney. Now we talk about, and it's the outer layer, of course. Now we talk about the muscular layer. Now the muscular layer is a middle layer and it contains smooth muscle fibers that twist around the ureter. It twists around the ureter, forming a network. Now we talk about the mucosa. Now this mucosa is the innermost layer and it is lined with transitional epithelial cells. Now that takes us to the gross structure of the ureter. Now the gross structure of the ureter is also made up of three parts. We have the abdominal parts, we have the pelvic parts, and we have the intramural part. So for the abdominal parts, so this part actually extends from the renal pelvis. So it extends from the renal pelvis down to the pelvic brim and lies on the psoas major muscles. The pelvic parts, so for the pelvic parts, it extends from the pelvic brim and goes down into the pelvis through the lateral pelvic walls because they are lying on two sides. So now we talk about the intramural part. So this intramural part is the shortest part. So this part actually penetrates the bladder, the posterior part of the bladder obliquely. That's slanty. It penetrates the bladder. Organs associated with the ureter. Superiorly to the ureter is the kidneys, then inferiorly to the ureter is the bladder. Then we have blood supply. So for the arterial blood supply, the ureter gets their blood from two major arteries, that's the renal artery and the iliac artery. So for the venous drainage, they drain their veins through three major veins, that's the renal veins, the iliac veins, and the gonadal veins. Now we talk about the nerve supply. Actually, it's always sympathetic and parasympathetic. So thank you very much for watching, and do well to like, follow. So our next video, we are going to be starting from the bladder and the urethra, and we are going to also be talking about micturition. So thank you very much, and I hope you've learned something today. Bye.